And welcome back to part 4 Neptunia Reverse, where today we're doing a bit of optional content. We've got our extra party members that we get, as it's part of the DLC, or if you're playing Reverse you just get them. And so we're going to go to do some optional dungeons with Plutia in our party. Just because they're in most optional dungeons, and moving into chapter 2 they'll be in most main dungeons as well. There's an optional encounter that will have a unique mark on the map when you approach them. That's essentially, it's not like a super boss, but it is a boss fight per se. It's a much tougher encounter, and it's a one-of-a-kind enemy when you fight them. If you're playing on Rebirth 1, at this point in the game, I can guarantee you're gonna struggle. You might be able to beat the one in this dungeon, but to jump the gun, you're gonna get the resources to unlock another optional dungeon and then go do that afterwards. The optional boss of that dungeon, no. At this stage of the game, you are not gonna be prepared to be able to deal with and fight.
Lucky.
Especially if you haven't got the DLC, so it's literally just Nep, Compa, and Iffy. Compa really doesn't do damage in this game. Like, she's a dedicated healer through and through. Her damage dealing is pathetically minuscule. And Iffy, despite being a good damage dealer, is just always going to underperform compared to the goddesses, so the team will fall apart very quickly in that fight. What I showed there was another weapon I got through fishing. And it wasn't even my intentions. Like, off screen I just happened to do a bit of fishing and I got a greatsword. Neptune can carry 2 different weapon types. She can carry normal swords or two-handed greatswords. The two-handed greatswords tend to have more power, but they add more wait time to all of her attacks because they slow her down. So there'll be a slightly bigger gap between one action and the next. I almost never go to normal swords once I get a greatsword though. You just learn to compromise it because the damage gain from it is too good to justify giving up just so you can go a little sooner, sort of thing. And here's me also addressing Plutia's setup a little bit.
Ambush successful.
And the reason why I chose Plutia to be my 4th party member for a while, and she's going to remain that way until we get a mandatory 4th party member to take her spot, is because, and I mentioned it last time, Plutia I think is the best character in the series. She's not my personal favourite, but in terms of, especially in the 3rd game, the way they write her, how her scenes are and how she affects the story, she's the main character of the 3rd game, not Nep. Nep likes to pretend she's the main character, but in the nicest possible way, this is the only game, I believe, where Neptune is genuinely the main character. In the sequel, it's absolutely Nepgear. In the 3rd game, although it's from Neptune's perspective for the whole game, it's absolutely Plutia's show. And in the 4th game, although she's not present for the 2nd act and it jumps around a bit more, the story is focused around Uzume. It's just a lot of it tends to be from Neptune's perspective. And even then, the 4th game jumped from perspective to perspective all the time. Even in Act 1, that was very much like a giant tutorial. You spent a good chunk of time from Nepgear's perspective. In the whole 2nd act, it was 4 stories of one for each of the 4 goddesses. And it's only in Act 3 that things started to come together a bit more. And there, we just got a very nice skill, a very appreciated one for Neptune. We got Blaze Break, which is, there we go, it's one of her EX finishes. So we've got a fire-based EX finish, and it's also magic-based as well. So if you've got something to base off the magic stat as well, which I think at this point in the game is the only skill Neptune has that's based off magic. Obviously she'll get much more as the game goes on, but for now, that's something, so you've got a bit more ground covered in your moveset. The other reason why I'm using Plutia so much is because some of her early game skills, when she starts unlocking them, are very helpful. Similar to Iffy's starting skill, Plutia will soon learn a skill with a decent amount of range on it that will work well for initial spawn groups of enemies, and doesn't cost as much SP as Iffy's does. But then on top of that, Plutia, I believe, like, Iffy's not on full SP right this second, but you can see she's got more than half because of how far the bar is full up. Plutia has a lot more SP as well, so she can get more uses out of it. So if you are playing Reverse, and you're not playing a ranged mode, because a ranged mode, you know, breaks the balance of the game in 2 anyway,
What's this?
I would recommend chucking Plutia on for now. If you're trying to go canonical, you're stuck with a party of 3 for a good while. If you're trying to play it like exactly how it's intended, it will be Neptune, Iffy, and Compa for a decent stretch of the game. Because even though we'll get a 4th party member during Chapter 2, they're not permanent yet. They will actually leave after Chapter 2, and you'll be back to 3 for a decent stretch afterwards. Which is why I specify about making sure to take care of that party of 3. So if you're playing reverse, especially if you're playing arranged mode, this isn't a problem, because arranged mode makes it so absolutely every single character in the game is available right from the start. Which is an extremely inflated set, because that also includes very secret characters that you usually have to go very out of your way to unlock.
Let's enjoy this to the full.
But here's the optional extra encounter. This thing does count as a boss enemy, and you're going to see, other than the fact it's called Dangerous, that it tanks a lot more. It's tanking the whole of Iris Heart here, which no normal enemy in the game should. They should, like, normal enemies should always kind of fall apart when you're in your goddess transformations, but this thing's like holding its ground. Fighting this thing with just Neptune, Iffy, and Compa turns this fight into a nightmare, but it can be done after like 2 or 3 attempts. But look how much that hurts. 1,000 damage, and we're in the goddess form, we've got the heightened defense. That thing can potentially one-shot the 2 humans in the party. Or, to use the canonical term, which they didn't use that, well, they don't use it in this game, but in the sequel onwards they start using it a lot more often. They're called makers, not humans.
Where's the patient?
The people that make up the world that are significant in any sense of the word are makers, because their name is usually referring to a game company. Like Iffy is, the reason why Iffy and Compa are always there right from the start is because Iffy is Idea Factory, hence IF, aka the development team that makes the Neptunia series, and Compa is short for Compile Heart, the publishers of the Neptunia series, which is why they're best friends and always are friends to Nep, because it was because of those two's collaboration that this game kind of got to exist in the first place, and this series even happened. And that will continue with every character we meet onwards. I mentioned before that Plutia and Uzume are kind of exceptions to the rules slightly, and what I mean is that Neptune is the goddess of Planetune in Ultra Dimension, and in this non-canon first game, Super Dimension, whilst Plutia is from Ultra and Uzume is from Zero Dimension, or Heart Dimension, depending on how you want to look at it. They all represent Sega because of Planetune. Planetune is the nation that represents Sega through and through. Neptune being the Mega Drive, Plutia being the Saturn, and Uzume being the Dreamcast. And you can see that a lot in their designs, like the haircuts and whatnot. Netgear, the younger sister, is the Game Gear from Sega's side of things. And it's also why Vert doesn't have a little sister, because Vert represents the Xbox, and all the little sisters represent the handheld versions of a console, and there isn't a handheld Xbox, so Vert doesn't have a little sister. But as I've been talking through it, that's pretty much it for this optional dungeon. It's just a loot grind with an optional fight during it. Off screen, I do end up clearing a quest as well. On screen, you saw that, but off screen I do go back because we get the plan to rearrange items, and so I go back with the rearranged items to get more basic loot as well. There's also one lone quest here you're not going to see me accept, because it's a very good redoable quest for items and rewards, but to make it so there's an incentive to not do it, the shares will go straight into other by a large stretch. You saw a cut there because that was me just checking my first to make sure everything's alright. But here's the second optional dungeon we can do right now. Through here, we will pick up a plan for a third optional dungeon, but to develop that plan, it requires an item that is found in a mandatory Chapter 2 dungeon. So that optional dungeon will be counted as a Chapter 2 area. So once we finish Chapter 2, we'll go back and clear out that area. But in saying that, I'm still working out the finer details. Unlike Nocturne, where I went out of my way to record very far in advance, so if there was any hiccups I could deal with them long before it got to me doing the video for it. Neptunia as a series is very relaxed. And so I'm only like a video or two ahead at any given time. I haven't done that much. In fact, over the weekend I'll probably record more because this video will upload on the Monday and I record it on the Friday. Because I'm still keeping that from Nocturne. Nocturne was the first Let's Play I started doing it, and I'm going to continue doing it, presumably every Let's Play moving forward. I do everything the day before it uploads, and then upload it privately, and then on the next day, because then throughout the course of the day, I have time to go through it and clean up anything that's a bit off, or sort something out in post if it needs to be sorted, and then the next day I can then just set it to public, and there you go. But now we need to talk about another thing, which starting from this optional dungeon, and it's going to start showing up in mandatory ones as well, can happen per chance, and if it ever does happen, you need to change the dynamic of how you handle the fight, because it can end the fight against you very quickly. It's part of the reason why a lot of people say that the first Nep is the hardest game in the series, because these guys are walking difficulty spikes. Any enemy in the game from this point onwards, the closer they are to death but aren't dead, the higher their chance they have of transforming into a stronger variant of themselves. It just one-shot Nep. And Nep's got the best stats in the party right now. Which is why I'm panicking slightly, as you can see in my recording. The viral monsters, I get what they were trying to do, to try and keep you guessing sort of thing. Like, they wanted to make it so every time you fight an enemy in the game, you're only pushing for guard break, and then when you break the guard, you're only pushing for health to try and kill them in one go. If you try and just push for damage right from the start, you'll lower their health, but you likely won't kill them, and so they have a higher chance of becoming a viral monster afterwards. Certain viral monsters have unique loot to them though. So once again, if you're going for true 100%, where I mentioned before where this game really becomes a guide game, my god, it really becomes a guide game. We also picked up a new skill for Nep during that, Hot Edge. So now she has a fire-based skill on her normal power combo. You usually don't want your power combos to be entirely elemental based, because you will eventually encounter an enemy that is very elemental resistant. So make it so there's like 1 or 2 skills, or if you are going to go full elemental, make it so every attack in the chain isn't the same element. Like if you have a thunder skill, a wind skill, and a fire skill, then have 1 of each on your set. Don't have 2 fires and a wind, or all 3 fires sort of thing, because you will go undone. You can also tell in this optional dungeon they don't expect you to do just yet, because even without the viral enemies, stuff's surviving a lot of brutality, even with Plutia in the party. Which, like I said, at this stage in the game, you're technically only supposed to have a party of 3. But that wolf also went viral, and then proceeded to rip heads off. It got a crit on Neptune, which is why Nep died but Compa didn't, despite the fact Nep has higher defense. Which was very unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I immediately had Plutia transform into Iris Heart, her masochistic... No, I think the game calls her Sadie. In the 3rd game, she gets nicknamed Sadie, Iris Heart, so sadistic is the better word choice, I believe. But her sadistic alter ego, which comes out when she is transformed. Which is also part of the reason why I love the character so much, because she's basically 2 characters in one. She's the sleepy, ditzy, but smarter than she lets on Plutia. But when she transforms, she's the completely sadistic, torturous, with a sword. You don't see it in the gameplay, unfortunately. But her sword, can stretch out into a whip, just to add to her sadistic tendencies. And like, I mean, look at her design. She's dressed like a dominatrix, for goodness sake. Like, I love the dynamic of how much her character shifts, and as I keep on saying, I just think it's a matter of when, not if. When they do reverse 2 and reverse 3, especially in reverse 3, you're gonna see it. You're gonna see Plutes in her full fury. By the end of that game, even the villains are scared of her. Because even though she's very innocent as Plutia, when she's Iris Heart, she is dangerous. But then here's a good example of what I meant. Like, she's got thunder and fire, so I alternate between the 2. Also, Compa's dead. Dead characters don't get experience, so be wary of that. Neptunia as a series is extremely forgiving of how you get experience. It doesn't matter if the character is not in the fight. It doesn't matter if they're not even like assisted. So they can completely bench characters. They will still get experience. And the idea is because they want you to use every single member of the party somewhat. They don't want you to just pick a team and then the rest gets so left behind that you never use them again. Like, say, Final Fantasy VIII. Where that game, it's very easy to let your party fall behind because they don't level up unless you're using them. Which is weird because they do in 7. Like, I never got that with Final Fantasy VIII. They got rid of that despite the fact, yeah, background characters leveled up in 7. They didn't get as much experience, but they still did, so you could go back to them and use them. Yeah, but whatever. But my point is that everyone gets experience, so feel free to, as you unlock new members, or once again, if you're playing in arranged mode, alternate your party and experiment and do different things to see what kind of composition you find that you like. You can make genuinely anything work if you give it enough time and effort, but clearly there are some that are stronger than others. When we get access to the 4 main goddesses, because we will as the duration of the game, like, that's not a spoiler, it's literally on the box art of every single version of the game that all 4 of the goddesses are playable. You just have to get far enough to unlock them. Your main party will almost definitely only consist of them. If you're playing the original or Rebirth 1 or Rebirth 1 Plus, your final team will probably be Nep, Blanc and Vert. You'll probably drop Noir because Noir is a good accompanying piece to Nep, but she plays very similar to Nep. She's just quicker and gives up damage for it. Whilst Blanc is a very good damage dealer and has good healing abilities later on. And Vert in Nep 1, I don't know what happened, but she is broken. Look, I will try and showcase what I mean, but Vert in Nep 1 is straight up busted. Like when we get EXE drive skills, not the finishes, like the actual full-on EXE drives where you press the square button and you get to use this, like an ultimate special attack sort of thing. Vert has one that only costs 1 EXE drive, so it's very easy to build up because it's only 1 bar, and it will hit about 24-25 times and can max out the damage on every hit. It can do 9,999 damage per hit. And it's so ridiculous that it hits that many times. It's literally like Knights of the Round from Final Fantasy 7 on crack, but there's no cost, and you don't have to grind out a gold chocobo to get it. Like, it's so ridiculously busted in Nep 1. And what I find hilarious is that because in the second game you play as the little sisters, you don't unlock access to the main goddesses until very late in the game. So they kind of didn't bother fixing it. Like, Vert's kind of broken in that as well. I even did a video on it at the time where I recorded off my phone because I didn't have any recording software to record off my Vita, showing that yes, Vert is still broken in the second game. They only balanced her in the third game, and I've mentioned it a couple times before, but the third game I felt oversteered. And what I mean by that is that in the third game, they straight up got rid of level 1 EXEs. You could only use level 2 or higher. And the thing with, and I'll get more into it as we get access to it, right now we only have 1 EXE bar. As the game goes on, we will extend that bar so it can become, because right now, you see where it's maxed out, it's level 1. Eventually the bar will double in length, and when we get to that length, it will still be level 1, but when we get it to the full new length, it will be level 2. And then it will get extended again to make it to go level 3, and then, I can't remember if it's this game or the next one, but you can extend it to level 4 as well. But I don't know if that was something exclusive to the sequel. I'm drawing a blank on that. But I think this game, it goes to level 4 as well, but it might stop at level 3. But I'm rambling. The point is, your EXE bars expand, and when you get your EXE drive skills, you straight up spend a bar to use it. And level 1 EXEs, as the name implies, spend only 1 bar, level 2 spend 2, 3 spends 3, and 4 spends 4. Also, I tried to fight the optional boss here, and I got wrecked on my first attempt. Because I came into that fight with Iffy and Compa right off the start, and they got demolished, so I was at a disadvantage. So there's my first game over. So when I go back, I have Pishi and Uzume in my front party instead, and it ends up working out a lot better because of it. Because I have 4 goddesses on the front line in a game where you're only supposed to have 3 characters, and in a point in the game where you're only supposed to have 1 of them be a goddess. So I kind of raw powered the balance difference on this, because you're really not supposed to fight this thing for like another 20 levels yet. But anyway, EXE2 skills, or EXE drive skills that cost 2 bars, tend to require extra requirements other than being level 2. The main one being, you have to have a specific other person in your party, or have a specific assist. Like a specific character be your assist. because it will be a skill that involves them, and some are assist based where it will say, to give an example, Neptune might have one with Compa, and Compa will have to be in Neptune's assist slot for it to be able to do it. But there will be another one that might be IF and Compa, but they both just need to be active in party. They don't need to be assisting. They both need to be in your main party, and they will do it together because it costs from both of them, sort of thing. EXE3s tend to be the same deal, but you get the odd EXE3 that will say the whole party of 4 needs to be this specific party of 4 to be able to do it. Meaning you'll probably never see an EXE3 from me because I usually like to stick to my team comp. But EXE4s, which like I said, the sequel goes a lot more all out on, goes back to only being one character, usually. Like, there's a couple that require a couple, but for the most part, they're only one character. But the balancing act of them is, well, you're using all 4 levels. You're going straight back to 0. And in late game, you're gonna want to be able to keep a hold of EXE finishers. So giving them up, straight up, is a terrible decision more often than not. You're only gonna use it if you're absolutely sure you're gonna finish a boss fight that's gonna take you out of the dungeon anyway, sort of thing. Because those EXE finishers are very helpful. And in a lot of instances, especially in this game, where EXE 1s are already kind of... they're already kind of strong, even ignoring how broken verts are. Sometimes you might just want to do 2 or 3 level 1s instead of doing 1 level 4. And it might end up doing higher damage in the end. Like I said, the balance is kind of weird. It took them a while to get the balance together. The second game, ignoring vert as a whole, is better balanced. But the third game, as I said before, I felt oversteered by completely removing level 1s. You have to adjust to using assists and team EXEs to use EXE attacks full stop in the third game. And then in the fourth game, the original version of the fourth game, I'm not actually sure how they balanced on top of my head because I've only really experienced V2R. But if I'm honest, as we watch Pishi with her horrendously giant jugs use one of her stronger beginning attacks, if reverse 2 and 3 actually happen, I'm genuinely considering buying base V2 and covering that as well, so you can see the original version of the fourth game, because the director's cut, I am very much aware, and I explained a lot during that Let's Play, changed a lot of the fundamentals but kept the story and characters the same. But the actual gameplay was different, and to be honest, I didn't mind it. I know a lot of people like this older style, but I genuinely liked V2R's style and what it did by making it more streamlined, so you're more, like, constant. Like, the gameplay was moving more. Whilst this, it's a lot more traditional turn-based.
I'll finish this.
But whilst we're in the party, I should talk about how Pishi works and how Uzume works. If you watch V2R, you already have an idea of how Uzume works. Uzume is very good crowd control. She gets a lot of group-based skills, but she gets pretty good physical skills too. But her magic is worthless. So for this stage in the game, she's alright, because magic isn't that important right now anyway. Pishi has the highest physical attack stat of any character in the series. But that's kind of all she's got going for her. Like, she's gonna punch motherfuckers harder than anyone else. You just gotta let her. Like, Pishi's kinda ridiculous how good her physical attack is, but she's genuinely a one-trick pony in that regard. The other thing I want to talk about, just before this video ends, is that in this specific re-release, they really cranked up how quickly your Lily ranks level up. In the original, it was around 50 fights to make it go up a single level without using specific plans that boost it up, or specific accessories that boost up the rate. Because that was how you got them up quickly. You boost up the rate through an accessory set, got the plan for it, and then you could bring it down to 10 fights to hit a level. The reason why I know this is because that dictates endings in the sequel. But in this re-release, in reverse, they really amped it up, and I can only assume it's because of a ranged mode giving you access to so many characters. They want you to be able to get the Lily ranks up for everyone at a decent rate. But we've done everything there, and we also pick up Noma Cave from the information center at Last Station. Noma Cave we're not going to get access to for a little while, because it's a much harder dungeon and requires 128 megabytes, which we don't have enough space for in the planning system. Autumn Fields, the only item we're missing, is, like I said, from a mandatory dungeon in Chapter 2. But that's it for the optional stuff, so I'm going to stop talking your ear off about other stuff and wrap up. I also get a new costume for Nep, which I'll be keeping for a little while. Next time on Neptunia Reverse, we'll be going into La Station properly, and finding out what's going on there. But until then, you guys take care now. Peace.